The year is 1643. The 30 Years' War has been raging across Europe for a quarter of a century, a seemingly endless cycle of violence, famine, and disease. Spain, once the most powerful nation in Europe, finds its dominance waning. The Spanish tercios, formations of pikemen and musketeers, have been the undisputed masters of the European battlefield for over a century. They were a symbol of Spanish military might and discipline. But now, a new power is rising in the north. France took tea. France is under the regency of Anne of Austria and the deft political maneuvering of Cardinal Mazarin. The young King Louis XIV is only 4 years old, but his armies are eager to prove their worth. The immediate context for the battle is the French invasion of the Spanish Netherlands. A powerful Spanish army, commanded by the experienced but cautious Francisco de Melo, has besieged the French fortress of Rocroi. The fortress is strategically important. Its fall would open the way for a Spanish invasion of France itself. The French, led by the 21-year-old Louis de Bourbon, Duke of Enghien, are determined to relieve the siege. Enghien, later known as the Grand Condé, is a bold and audacious commander. He's a stark contrast to the more traditional de Melo. He is willing to take risks that other commanders would shy away from. The Spanish army is a formidable force. It is composed of veteran soldiers from across the Spanish Empire: Spaniards, Italians, Walloons, and Germans. Their infantry is arranged in the traditional tercio formation, a dense square of pikemen with musketeers at the corners. This formation is incredibly resilient to cavalry charges. It has proven almost invincible in open battle. The Spanish cavalry, however, is considered inferior to the French. De Melo, confident in the strength of his infantry, deploys his army in a strong defensive position. Woods and marshes protect his flanks. He expects a conventional battle. He believes the superior discipline and firepower of his tercios will grind down the French assault. Enghien, however, has no intention of fighting a conventional battle. He recognizes the strength of the Spanish infantry, but also sees its weakness, its lack of mobility. He plans to use his superior cavalry to outmaneuver the Spanish. He intends to attack their flanks and rear. The French army is a more modern force. It places a greater emphasis on cavalry and artillery. Enghien's plan is a gamble. If his cavalry is defeated, his own infantry will be exposed to the full might of the tercios. The night before the battle is tense. The French army marches through the night. They arrive before the Spanish positions at dawn on May 19th, 1643. The battlefield is a small plain, surrounded by woods and marshes. The air is thick with mist and the smoke from campfires. The two armies deploy for battle. A sea of pikes and banners stretches across the plain. Spanish are confident, even arrogant. They have not been defeated in a major battle for over a century. The French are anxious but determined. They know that the fate of France rests on their shoulders. The battle begins with a massive artillery duel. The French guns, more numerous and better served, inflict heavy casualties on the dense tercio formations. The Spanish infantry stands firm. They endure the bombardment with stoic courage. Enghien then launches his main attack. He personally leads the French cavalry on the right wing. He charges the Spanish cavalry opposite them. The French cavalry, better trained and more aggressive, shatters the Spanish horsemen. They drive them from the field. On the French left wing, however, the situation is very different. The French cavalry, under the less experienced La Ferté-Sénétaire, is defeated. The Spanish cavalry drives them back in disorder. The Spanish cavalry then turns on the exposed French infantry. They threaten to roll up the entire French line. Enghien, seeing the danger, makes a bold decision. Instead of pursuing the defeated Spanish cavalry on his right, he rallies his own horsemen. He leads them on a wide, sweeping maneuver around the rear of the Spanish army. This is the decisive moment of the battle. Enghien's cavalry falls upon the rear of the Spanish infantry. The Spanish are already engaged with the French infantry to their front. The tercios, designed to fight in one direction, are caught completely by surprise. They are attacked from the front, flank, and rear simultaneously. The once invincible squares begin to crumble. The French infantry, encouraged by the success of the cavalry, redoubles its efforts. The fighting is brutal and merciless. The Spanish soldiers, even in defeat, fight with desperate courage. The Tercio of Albuquerque, composed of veteran Spanish soldiers, refuses to surrender. They form a circle, their pikes bristling in all directions. They fight to the last man. The Duke of Enghien, impressed by their bravery, offers them honorable terms of surrender. But they refuse. The battle becomes a slaughter. By the end of the day, the Spanish army is annihilated. Thousands are killed or wounded. Thousands more are taken prisoner. The French have won a stunning victory. The myth of Spanish invincibility is shattered. The Battle of Rocroi marks a turning point in European history. It signals the end of Spanish dominance, marks the beginning of the rise of France as the preeminent military power in Europe. The consequences of the battle are far-reaching. The defeat at Rocroi is a devastating blow to Spanish prestige and morale. It weakens Spain's position in the ongoing negotiations to end the 30 Years' War. France, on the other hand, is emboldened by the victory. The young Louis XIV's reign begins with a spectacular military triumph. The Duke of Enghien becomes a national hero. His reputation as a brilliant military commander is secured. The battle also has a profound impact on military tactics. The demise of the Tercio formation signals the end of the age of pike and shot. It is the beginning of the age of linear tactics. Infantry would now be deployed in long lines to maximize firepower. The importance of cavalry and artillery is also highlighted. Rocroi is a victory for a more modern, mobile, and flexible style of warfare. In the aftermath of the battlefield is a scene of carnage. The bodies of men and horses litter the plain. Wounded cry out for help. The French soldiers, exhausted but jubilant, celebrate their victory. The captured Spanish soldiers, proud and defiant, even in defeat, are marched away. The news of the victory spreads like wildfire across Europe. It sends shockwaves through the courts of kings and princes. The Battle of Rocroi is more than just a single military engagement. It is a symbol of a changing world. The old order, dominated by the Habsburg dynasty of Spain and Austria, is giving way. A new order, dominated by the Bourbon dynasty of France, is rising. The balance of power in Europe is shifting decisively. The legacy of Rocroi is complex. For Spain, it is a source of national humiliation. It is a reminder of a golden age that has passed. For France, it is a source of national pride. It is a symbol of military glory and the beginning of a long period of French cultural and political dominance. For military historians, it is a case study in brilliant generalship and the evolution of warfare. The story of Rocroi is the story of a young, ambitious commander who dared to challenge the established order. It is the story of two armies, one representing the past and the other, the future. It is the story of a single day that changed the course of European history. The sun that set on the battlefield of Rocroi on May 19th, 1643, also set on the Spanish century. A new era, the age of French ascendancy, had begun. Morning of May 19th, 1643, dawned with a heavy mist clinging to the fields outside the besieged fortress of Rocroi. The air was still, pregnant with the impending clash of two great armies. The Spanish forces, under the command of Don Francisco de Melo, were confident. Their reputation preceded them. The Spanish tercios were the most feared infantry in Europe. They were a seemingly unbreakable wall of pikes and muskets. They had chosen their ground well, anchoring their flanks on woods and marshland. This created a formidable defensive position. De Melo, a cautious and experienced general, expected the French to break themselves against his lines. Opposing them was a French army led by a man of a very different temperament. Louis de Bourbon, the 21-year-old Duke of Enghien, was audacity personified. He was young, ambitious, and possessed a keen strategic mind. His mind saw not just the strength of the Spanish position, but also its inherent inflexibility. He knew that a frontal assault would be suicidal. His plan was daring, relying on the superior quality of his cavalry. He also relied on his own ability to react to the chaos of battle. He intended to use speed and maneuver to overcome the raw power of the Spanish formation. The French had marched through the night, a grueling test of endurance. They arrived before the Spanish at first light. As the mist began to burn off, the two armies deployed in their full battle array. The Spanish formed their traditional, massive squares of infantry, the tercios. They positioned their cavalry on the wings. The French, in contrast, deployed in a more linear formation. This was designed to maximize the firepower of their musketeers and artillery. The visual contrast was stark. The dense, static power of Spain versus the more flexible, mobile arrangement of France. The battle commenced not with the clash of steel, but with the roar of cannons. The French artillery, better positioned and more numerous, began to tear gaps in the tightly packed Spanish ranks. The tercios endured the bombardment with grim determination, their discipline holding firm under the iron rain. This was a test of nerve, a bloody prelude to the main event. Enghien watched intently, waiting for the right moment to unleash his cavalry. He chose to lead the charge himself on the French right wing. With a cry of "Follow me!" he spurred his horse forward. His elite cavalry thundered across the field. The Spanish cavalry opposite them, composed mainly of Flemish and German horsemen, braced for the impact. The French charge was irresistible. Enghien's horsemen crashed into the Spanish lines, the shock of the impact shattering their formation. A swirling melee ensued, but the superior training and elan of the French cavalry proved decisive. Spanish horsemen broke and fled, leaving the flank of their infantry exposed. However, on the opposite side of the battlefield, the French were in trouble. The French left-wing cavalry, commanded by La Flotte Sanitaire, lacked the drive and discipline of Enghien's command. They were met by a determined charge from the Spanish cavalry under the Duke of Albuquerque. The French horsemen wavered, then broke, fleeing in disarray. Albuquerque's victorious cavalry, instead of pursuing the routed enemy, turned their attention to the now exposed French infantry. The situation was critical. The French battle line was on the verge of collapse. This was the moment that defined Enghien's genius. Seeing the disaster unfolding on his left, he made a split-second decision. Instead of pursuing the fleeing Spanish cavalry before him and securing his own flank, he rallied his victorious horsemen. He then led them on a breathtaking ride across the entire rear of the Spanish army. It was a maneuver of incredible audacity, a grand cavalry sweep that would be studied by military tacticians for centuries to come. The Spanish infantry, already engaged in a fierce firefight with the French infantry to their front, were completely unaware of the storm gathering behind them. Engien's cavalry descended upon their rear like a thunderbolt. The tercios, designed for frontal combat, were suddenly assailed from all sides. The disciplined squares, once thought impregnable, began to buckle under the pressure. The French infantry, seeing their commander's brilliant maneuver, surged forward with renewed courage. The heart of the Spanish army was now a cauldron of chaos and death. The tercios, surrounded and outnumbered, fought with the courage of despair. The Tercio of Albuquerque, an elite unit of veteran Spanish soldiers, became a legend on that day. They formed a great square, a fortress of pikes and muskets, and refused to yield. They repelled charge after charge. Their commander, the old Count of Fuentes, fighting on foot after his horse was shot from under him. Engien, his victory now assured, was moved by the incredible bravery of these last Spanish soldiers. He rode forward and offered them honorable terms of surrender. But the proud veterans, their honor demanding they fight to the end, refused. The battle degenerated into a final, bloody act of destruction. The French, frustrated by the stubborn resistance, brought up their artillery and fired point-blank into the Spanish square. Last Tercio was annihilated, its banner falling only when the last man was struck down. As the smoke cleared and the sounds of battle faded, the scale of the French victory became apparent. The Spanish army of Flanders, the pride of the Spanish Empire, had ceased to exist. Thousands lay dead or dying on the field, and thousands more were captured, including many of their most experienced officers. The French had suffered casualties, but they had won a victory that would resonate throughout Europe. The news of Rocroi was a thunderclap that shook the foundations of Spanish power. The myth of the invincibility of the tercios was shattered forever. For over a century, Spain had been the dominant military power in Europe. Its armies were the benchmark against which all others were measured. That era ended on the bloody fields of Rocroi. The victory marked the beginning of the ascent of France as the new military hegemon of the continent. The young Duke of Enghien, Rocroi was a personal triumph. At the age of 21, he had achieved a victory that would make him a living legend. He would later be known as the Great Condé, one of the most brilliant generals in French history. His audacity, his tactical flexibility, and his ability to inspire his men had won the day. The battle also had a profound impact on the art of war. The demise of the tercio signaled a shift away from dense infantry formations towards more linear tactics that emphasized firepower. The importance of a powerful and well-led cavalry, capable of both shock action and decisive maneuver, was demonstrated for all to see. Rocroi was a harbinger of the future of warfare. In the years that followed, Spain's decline continued, while France's power grew. The 30 Years' War would eventually end with the Peace of Westphalia in 1648. This treaty confirmed the new balance of power in Europe. The victory at Rocroi was a crucial step on that road. It was a decisive blow from which the Spanish Empire would never fully recover. The battlefield of Rocroi, once a scene of horrific violence, became a symbol. For the French, it was a symbol of national glory and the beginning of the Grand Siècle, the great century of Louis XIV. For the Spanish, It was a painful memory of a golden age lost. It was a testament to the fleeting nature of power. The story of the battle is not just one of tactics and strategy, but also of human courage and sacrifice. The image of the last tercio, fighting to the death rather than surrendering, is a powerful testament to the ideals of honor and duty that motivated the soldiers of that era. The Battle of Rocroi was a clash of empires, a clash of military doctrines, and a clash of wills. It was a day when the old world died and a new one was born. It was forged in the fire and blood of one of the most decisive battles in European history. The sun had set on the Spanish Empire, and a new sun was rising over the Kingdom of France.